Are you dreaming? How do you know any of this is real? If there's one question the movies keep asking us, it's this: what is reality? In this video, we're going to explore three questions. Firstly, what can the movies teach us about the nature of reality and why it isn't always what it seems? Secondly, what do the greatest philosophers and thinkers on the subject of reality have to say? And finally, how can you apply this to your own life? Can you ever really know what's real and what's not? To answer these questions, I've spent the past 6 months diving into over 30 films that span over a century of cinema. Along the way, I've been testing these ideas through 22 shorts here on the channel, and this video is the big picture they've all been building towards. What you're about to watch may change the way that you see the world forever, so prepare yourself to question everything you thought you knew. I'm Tom D. Mann, and you're watching The Movies Present, a guide to reality.
I've wanted to make this video about reality for the past couple of years now because I happen to think we live in a time where the concept of what is real has never been more fragile. Whether it's fake news, deep fakes, artificial intelligence, or conspiracy theories, we just can't seem to take anything for granted anymore. Which kind of makes this first movie on our list the perfect and kind of obvious place to start.
Did you know that every actor in The Matrix had to read this book before filming? It wasn't a script, it wasn't a training manual, it was this. Simulacra and Simulation by French philosopher Jean Baudrillard. It's a book about how our sense of reality is shaped and sometimes replaced by media images and manufactured versions of the world around us. Think of a Big Mac, and what you picture isn't the messy, slightly disappointing burger that you actually get when you buy it. No, it's the glossy, idealised version that McDonald's marketing department has spent millions on to burn into your brain. But what does this have to do with The Matrix? Well, Baudrillard's 1981 book wasn't translated into English until 1994, which happened to be the exact moment in time when the Wachowskis were starting to develop the screenplay for The Matrix. In the book, Baudrillard argues that we are surrounded by copies of things that start to mean more to us than the original thing that it's representing. Signs and symbols, ads, media brands start to replace the real world until we can't tell the difference. An example of this in today's world might be to think of someone that you don't know that well and then start to try and separate the real person from their carefully crafted social media profile. And you can see that the distinction starts to get a little bit murky. Baudrillard calls this the desert of the real, a world where we no longer experience reality, we experience a simulation of it. Sound familiar?
Welcome to the desert of the real.
That idea is at the core of The Matrix, and they take it one step further. A reality entirely manufactured by machines. A false world built from code. A simulation so convincing that people mistake it for truth. In fact, the Wachowskis reference the book directly in the film. Neo hides his contraband software inside a copy of Simulacra and Simulation. That in itself being a metaphor for how in this world reality is hollowed out and replaced by appearances. So you think that Baudrillard would be flattered, right? Not exactly. He hated The Matrix. He said that it fundamentally misunderstands his ideas, that it presents simulation as something that one can escape from. But to Baudrillard, there is no red pill. Simulation and reality are so intertwined that it's simply not possible to tell the difference anymore. I mean, think of that social media profile example that I gave earlier. And maybe that's the final twist. A film about illusion, based on a philosophy it never really understood, and yet it convinced the rest of us that it did, which might be the most Matrix thing of all.
Now, in fairness, The Matrix was actually influenced by a number of philosophical ideas going back hundreds, thousands of years even, and we'll come to these very shortly. But the concept that it's most closely associated with wasn't even given a name until years after its release, when Nick Bostrom proposed his now famous simulation argument.
Are You Living in a Computer Simulation was Bostrom's 2003 paper published in the Philosophical Quarterly. Although The Matrix is heavily associated with it, Bostrom claims he hadn't actually seen the movie prior to postulating his theory. Essentially, Bostrom's argument is this: there are only three possibilities. 1. Civilizations never reached the technological maturity to run simulations. 2. They do reach that point but choose not to run them. 3. We are almost certainly living in a computer simulation right now. That third possibility, that we are actually living in a computer simulation, would take another 13 years to blow up the internet when Elon Musk said this.
It would seem to follow that the odds that we're in base reality is 1 in billions. 40 years ago, we had Pong, like 2 rectangles and a dot. That was what games were. Now, 40 years later, we have photorealistic 3D simulations with millions of people playing simultaneously, and it's getting better every year. And soon we'll have virtual reality, we'll have augmented reality. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, the games will become indistinguishable from reality. Even if that rate of advancement drops by 1,000 from what it is right now, then you just say, okay, well, let's imagine it's 10,000 years in the future, which is nothing in the evolutionary scale. So given that we're clearly on a trajectory to have games that are indistinguishable from reality, and those games could be played on any set-top box or on a PC or whatever, and there would probably be billions of such computers or set-top boxes, it would seem to follow that the odds that we're in base reality is 1 in billions.
2021's A Glitch in the Matrix is a documentary film exploring the theme of simulation theory, mainly by interviewing people who believe we are living in a simulation. And we'll come back to that later in this video, where I'll also explain a fairly powerful argument against it. But for now, let's switch our attention to something that we all do, and that has troubled philosophers for as long as thinking has existed. I'm talking, of course, about dreams.
Vanilla Sky is one of the most criminally underrated Hollywood movies in the past 25 years, and there is something deeply unsettling about it. From that opening scene in actual Times Square, which is, by the way, one of the most expensive 15 seconds in movie history, the whole film is based on that well-trodden path of, it was all just a dream, or was it? In this movie, you're never quite sure what is real and what is imagined. And apparently there are 5 different ways of interpreting this movie, according to director Cameron Crowe. That uncertainty is what makes Vanilla Sky so interesting to me, and I'm sure it frustrates other moviegoers because it lacks definite answers. And I think the critics hated it because they didn't like the idea of Tom Cruise stepping into the kind of territory usually only reserved for independent movies like the original Spanish film that it's based on. But if you haven't seen it, then please give it a go if you like ambiguity in movies, because it doesn't just ask us to think about the nature of reality, it also asks us to think about identity and how fragile it really is. Tom Cruise's character David Ames has the world at his feet. Wealthy, charming, good looking, and the envy of his best friend Brian, played by Jason Lee. But after a horrific car accident leaves his face disfigured, he is forced to confront who he really is beneath all the surface glamour. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Tom Cruise chose himself to play a handsome but glib playboy who has to reevaluate his life. I think Cruise knows very well what movie audiences expect of him, and in this movie he uses that to subvert their expectations and throw them off guard. The reason this film is so unsettling is because it continually asks us to question the evidence of our own senses. When David wakes up, we wake up with him, but never fully trust what we're seeing. Every moment could be a part of a dream, a hallucination, or something carefully constructed to keep him believing in a false reality.
And that doubt is exactly what René Descartes expressed nearly 400 years earlier with his classic dream argument. Descartes asked, if a dream can be this vivid, this coherent, then how can we be so sure that we're not dreaming right now? He took it even further with this thought experiment. Suppose that a powerful deceiver, an evil demon, was manipulating our perceptions entirely. feeding us a version of reality so convincing that we'd never realise it wasn't real.
But in searching for the one thing he couldn't doubt, Descartes arrived at a single foundational truth: cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Even if everything else is deception, the very act of doubting proves that a thinking mind must exist. Your thoughts are real, and therefore you are real. That's the paradox that Vanilla Sky captures so perfectly. When everything else dissolves into doubt, David's awareness of that doubt is the one thing he can trust is real. This unresolved tension between dreams and reality is also memorably explored in a 1990 classic blockbuster based on a Philip K. Dick short story.
You got a lot of nerve showing your face around here, Hauser.
Look who's talking.
Total Recall might be the most quotable of all Arnold Schwarzenegger films.
Get your ass to Mars. See you at the party, Richter.
We're married.
See that at a divorce.
And is packed to the rafters with visuals you'll never forget. But the moment that sticks with me most is this: a single bead of sweat. Because that 2-second close-up is where the very premise of the film hangs in the balance.
I felt that it was extremely important for me, from a philosophical level, to make a movie that had two levels, and that both levels throughout would always be consistent, and that you could never say, now we are in a dream, or now we are in reality.
Director Paul Verhoeven describing how this film is perfectly designed to be 100% ambiguous.
Bullshit.
What's bullshit, Mr. Quaid? That you're having a paranoid episode triggered by acute neurochemical trauma? Or that you're really an invincible secret agent from Mars who's the victim of an interplanetary conspiracy to make him think he's a lowly construction worker?
People saw the movie and they came out of it saying, well, was it a dream or was it real? Because I thought that would just kind of be, people would sort of take that as like just a little curly cue at the end, and they wouldn't really take it seriously. But they did, they got into it.
So is this bead of sweat proof that Quaid is in the real world because the Doctor is fearing for his life? Or just a hyper-surreal moment in Quaid's paranoid dream? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. That interplay between dreams and reality has been a staple theme of cinema since forever. 8½, which has a very famous dream sequence that opens the movie, was hugely influential on the next generation of filmmakers, including people like Martin Scorsese and Terry Gilliam.
8½was so extraordinary. I remember seeing it on 57th Street at the Festival Theatre as soon as it opened, and trying to capture it. I went home and drew pictures from it. Luckily, I had seen it about 4 weeks before I shot my very first short film at NYU, and I just wanted to capture, first of all, the camera movement. Always keep the camera moving, because it became choreography.
Fellini and his cinematographer Gianni Di Venanzo use these long gliding camera movements that often drift between spaces and times without warning. That movement erases the normal boundaries between objective and subjective reality, so the camera itself feels like the mind of Guido, Marcello Mastroianni, floating between one thought or fantasy and another. Decades later, Inception, a big special effects movie with Christopher Nolan in the director's chair, took things to their most literal extremes, building dreams within dreams until reality becomes just another layer for Leonardo DiCaprio to escape from. Later in the video we'll explore another work by the same filmmaker, less of a spectacle than Inception, but I'd argue more effective in how it quietly dismantles our grip on reality. 71 years before Inception blurred the boundary between dream and waking life, The Wizard of Oz was already asking the same question, only in glorious Technicolor. Like many people, I always assumed that the 1939 film starring Judy Garland was the first trip to Oz. But in researching this video, I've discovered it was actually the 10th movie set in the land of Oz. What made Victor Fleming's version different was that it treated the journey as a dream. A story that begins and ends in the mind. So, was Dorothy's journey a dream, or was she really transported to a magical land of munchkins and witches? Well, that's for you to decide. Each of these films involving dreaming suggests the same uncomfortable truth, that the line between dreaming and waking is thinner than we'd ever like to admit. But if Vanilla Sky and those other movies on that theme show us a reality created from the inside out, then The Truman Show does the exact opposite, showing us a reality constructed entirely from the outside in. Truman Burbank wakes up each day in a perfect town. Blue skies, smiling faces, everything just right. What he doesn't know is that it's all fake. The place he calls home is actually a giant TV set built inside a dome where hidden cameras record his every move and is broadcast to an audience of millions. This has been happening without his knowledge since the day he was born. Imagine if that actually happened to you. Well, some people go even further than that because the film gave its name to a real psychological disorder, the Truman Show delusion, where people genuinely believe their lives are being secretly filmed and broadcast. The Truman Show was a rare thing in Hollywood, a completely original idea that resonated with audiences, but that was also a huge commercial success. Because it made money, The Truman Show inspired other copycat films like Ed TV, but none of these came close to capturing the same mixture of satire and tragedy. What's most remarkable, though, is how prescient it turned out to be. Released in 1998, just as the internet was taking off, it predicted a world where constant visibility would feel normal, where people would just volunteer to share their private lives for the entertainment of others. But what makes Truman's world so haunting isn't just that it's fake, it's that it has no sense of shared truth. And perhaps this is a good place to pause and talk about the idea of social reality. Social reality is the layer of the world we've built through shared agreement, things that only exist because we all believe they do. Money is the obvious example. Those pieces of paper or numbers on a screen only have value because we've all collectively decided they do. The same goes for wedding rings, borders, passports, maps. They're not laws of nature, they're social contracts that only work if everyone plays along. In other words, social reality is the glue that keeps our collective version of the world intact. Without it, as in Truman's world, life loses any real sense of mutual understanding and therefore meaning.
Let's put aside the idea of dreams and simulations for a moment, and just for the sake of argument suppose that there is such a thing as a single objective reality that exists regardless of human beings. The planet, the universe, the laws of physics, they'd all exist just fine without us around. The question then becomes, if such a single objective reality does indeed exist, then can we as humans ever fully perceive it? And the answer, according to most philosophers, is no. Even if reality is real, our senses distort it. What we see and hear are just interpretations, best guesses made by the brain.
Over 2,000 years ago, Plato gave us the most famous metaphor for this in the allegory of the cave. And there is a movie connection here because Orson Welles narrated a 1973 cartoon version of that story. It goes like this. A group of prisoners are chained inside a cave facing a wall, and behind them a fire casts shadows of objects carried past the light. To the prisoners, those shadows are reality, until one escapes and sees the world outside for the first time, and when he returns to tell the others, they refuse to believe it and even mock him. It's a story about perception, how our senses might only ever show us shadows of the truth. 18th century philosopher David Hume took that doubt further, arguing that all our knowledge comes through experience, yet our experiences can never give us absolute certainty. You might see the sun rise every morning, but that doesn't prove it will rise tomorrow. It only suggests it probably will. Then came Immanuel Kant, who drew a line between the world as it is, what he calls the noumenon, and the world as we experience it, the phenomenon. Our minds don't just record reality, they actively shape it, filtering everything through our senses. In other words, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. Modern science and psychology have confirmed what those philosophers suspected. The brain isn't a camera, it's a prediction machine. It takes incomplete information and fills in the blanks to create a coherent picture of the world, one that feels solid, even when it's not. That's why optical illusions fool us, why we sometimes see faces in clouds or hear our name in background noise. Our brains are so desperate for patterns and meaning that they'll invent them if necessary. And when that process breaks down entirely, we get hallucinations, realities constructed within the mind itself. Filmmakers have always been fascinated by this fragile boundary between perception and madness. In the 2011 Oscar-winning Black Swan, Nina's ambition distorts her reflection until she can't separate her body from her delusion. The idea of a psychological split isn't of course unique to Black Swan. A decade or so earlier, Fight Club explored that same theme.
You are now firing a gun at your imaginary friend, Tyler! Oh, come on. Don't go.
Fight Club makes us question whether Tyler Durden ever existed outside of the narrator's mind. David Fincher drops quick single-frame flashes of Brad Pitt long before Tyler officially appears. They flicker by so fast you almost don't notice them, like unwanted intrusive thoughts. Fincher said he wanted it to feel like a movie that was infecting itself, hinting that Tyler is already there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the narrator to see him. In 1966, Ingmar Bergman made Persona, a haunting minimalist film that redefined psychological cinema following a stint he'd had himself in hospital. The story follows a stage actress, Elizabeth, who suddenly stops speaking and is sent to recover by the sea under the care of a young nurse, Sister Alma. At first, Alma talks and Elizabeth listens, but as the movie goes on and their sense of isolation deepens, the identity of these two characters begins to dissolve. The more Alma speaks, the more her sense of self unravels, until we as the audience are no longer sure who's the nurse, who's the patient, and whether indeed they're just two halves of the same person. Bergman conceived the film after a very personal and creative breakdown, and this was a real turning point in his impact as a filmmaker. If Persona showed us identity splitting under pressure, Donnie Darko turns that fracture outward into time itself. Donnie's vision of a future no one else can see blurs the boundary between madness and prophecy. Like Fight Club, the film uses unreliability as its language, but where David Fincher's world is cynical and urban, Richard Kelly's is suburban and spiritual, a vision of adolescence haunted by determinism. Is Donnie really just a schizophrenic teenager, or someone who's simply seeing reality too clearly? The film never tells us, and that uncertainty is what makes it timeless. 1920s, the cabinet of Dr. Caligari imagined madness as a visual style, twisted sets and skewed perspectives to match the mind of its unreliable narrator. Even now, that film is really quite creepy, and it's one of the finest examples of a plot twist I've ever seen, way ahead of its time. These films show us that even when reality is real, it still has to go through the filter of our minds, which can be highly unreliable.
In the last section, we talked about human perception and how it colours our sense of reality in the present. But what about the past? Well, it's no surprise that memory and how easily it betrays us has been the driving force behind some of cinema's most compelling stories. But before diving into what those movies have to say, let's just take a closer look at memory and how it relates to the reality of self.
Philosophers like John Locke and David Hume both linked memory to personal identity. Locke argued that our sense of self is built from the continuity of memory, that you are the same person today because you can remember being you yesterday. But Hume disagreed. He claimed that when you really look for the self, all you find is a bundle of impressions, constantly shifting with nothing solid underneath. If perception distorts the world in real time, memory does it in hindsight. Every time we recall an event, the brain rebuilds it from fragments, part truth, part imagination. Neuroscientists now know that a memory isn't like a file we retrieve. It's more like a story we rewrite each time we tell it.
Why would I tell him about fucking Sammy?
You tell everybody about Sammy. Everybody will listen. Remember Sammy Jacobs? Remember Sammy Jacobs? Great story gets better every time you tell it.
Christopher Nolan's Memento dramatises this idea with brutal precision. Leonard, the protagonist, suffers from short-term memory loss and must piece together his life using tattoos and Polaroids.
I've told you this before, haven't I?
Yeah, I don't mean to mess with you, but it's so weird. You don't remember me at all.
No.
But the more he tries to reconstruct his past, the more it becomes clear that he's editing it, shaping the story to give his life meaning, even if that meaning is built on a lie. Ridley Scott's Blade Runner expands the same question to the level of existence itself. If our memories can be manufactured, then what separates a human being from a machine?
You remember the spider that lived in a bush outside your window? Orange body, green legs. Then one day there's a big egg in it.
The egg hatched,
Yeah.
and 100 baby spiders came out.
Implants. Those aren't your memories, they're somebody else's.
The replicant's implanted memories make them feel authentic emotions, suggesting that identity consciousness and even empathy might not depend on whether our experiences are real, but on simply whether we believe them. Famously, Harrison Ford and Ridley Scott clashed over one key question: whether Descartes himself was a replicant. Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon takes a different approach, showing us the same event through multiple conflicting testimonies. Each version feels genuine to the teller, but none can be verified. Truth splinters into perspectives. But there's a much more recent idea about memory which has exploded in popularity and been turned into a feature film. Have you ever remembered something with absolute certainty, only to discover it didn't happen the way you remembered it, or worse, didn't happen at all? Like the hyphen in the middle of the Kit Kat logo, never existed. Or the monocle worn by the Monopoly man, he never had one. This strange glitch in memory has a name: the Mandela effect. Coined in 2009 when people were convinced Nelson Mandela had died in prison years earlier, when in fact he went on to live a further 23 years after his release. And in 2019 a movie ran with the idea, the Mandela effect, asking, what if these false memories weren't mistakes at all, but cracks in a simulation that we're all living in? In the film, a grieving father becomes obsessed with these shared false memories, from missing Monopoly monocles to altered children's books. His obsession leads him to question whether reality itself has been rewritten. What starts as a personal tragedy spirals into a cosmic conspiracy. Maybe we're all living in a computer program and the glitches are bleeding through. But here's the question: if millions of us can misremember the same details, then maybe memory itself can't be trusted. And if memory collapses, then what happens to reality?
So far, we've mainly talked about reality as perceived by an individual. But what about collective reality, and who might be in control of shaping the reality experienced by a whole society?
Terry Gilliam's Brazil is the perfect place to start. It's like George Orwell's 1984 if 1984 was made into a feature film by someone who used to be in Monty Python. And yes, Terry Gilliam did used to be in Monty Python, along with Michael Palin, who's also in this movie. The basic premise is that Sam Lowry, played by Jonathan Pryce, is a low-level bureaucrat in a vast, soulless government department where the paperwork never stops. He's a quiet man with big daydreams, dreams of rescuing a mysterious woman from a dystopian nightmare. But when a clerical error leads to the wrongful arrest and death of an innocent man, Sam gets pulled into a spiral of paranoia and red tape that makes Kafka look like light reading. The genius of Brazil is how it turns bureaucracy into something surreal and terrifying. There's no villain pulling the strings as such, no mastermind behind the curtain, just a machine that keeps running because no one knows how to stop it. This bureaucratic horror perfectly illustrates the concept of power knowledge put forward by philosopher Michel Foucault. Foucault argued that power isn't something one person possesses, it's a strategy that operates through institutions, language, and the creation of knowledge. The sheer crushing volume of paperwork, regulations, and systems in Brazil is the knowledge used to categorise and control. The system itself is the warden, proving that sometimes the structure of reality is the ultimate agent of control. By the end, Sam's rebellion is thwarted. Although he thinks he's escaped the clutches of the system, it's all just a fantasy in his head. In contrast, John Carpenter's They Live replaces the maze of bureaucracy with something far more insidious, the illusion of freedom. And all it takes to break that illusion is a pair of sunglasses.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
The story follows a drifter called Nada, played by former wrestler Roddy Piper. He drifts into Los Angeles looking for work, but instead finds a city quietly hypnotised. People are glued to their TVs, surrounded by billboards barking orders like obey, consume, and stay asleep. Except that's not what they actually see.
They Live is about the Reagan Revolution being controlled by aliens from another galaxy. And they're dismantling the middle class and making the poor poorer and the rich richer. And it's told from the point of view of the homeless, where we see the world underneath the world. You put on a pair of sunglasses and all of a sudden the real world appears. It's in black and white, so these creatures have really colorized us like Ted Turner colorizes the classics.
They Live shows us how power can manipulate what we see, whereas Dark City, on the other hand, shows us how power can manipulate who we are. The film opens with a character called John Murdoch waking up in a bathtub with no memory and a dead body nearby. Oh, and for some reason it's always nighttime in Dark City. He soon discovers the truth. The entire world is an artificial construct controlled by pale telepathic beings who rewrite people's memories and reshape the city itself while everyone sleeps. One of the main pale telepathic beings, Mr. Hand, is actually played by Richard O'Brien, who of course wrote the Rocky Horror Picture Show and played Riff Raff in the movie. Released a year before The Matrix, Dark City explored many of the same themes, and The Matrix would even go on to recycle some of the same sets as both films were made in Fox Studios, Sydney, Australia. But its tone is markedly different, less cyberpunk and more dreamlike noir. It has a very similar feel or mise-en-scène to Blade Runner. Here, power isn't about control of perception or media, it's control of memory and meaning. And when Murdoch finally learns to tune reality himself by the end of the movie, it's unclear whether we're getting a happy ending or just watching the cycle begin all over again with Murdoch as the city's new jailer. Event Horizon offers a very different perspective on who might be pulling the strings of our collective reality. It's an odd blend of genres mixing sci-fi with supernatural horror, and I think is the scariest movie set in space, and that includes the Alien franchise. Set in the year 2047, it follows a rescue crew sent to investigate a ship that vanished into deep space, only to reappear near Neptune 7 years later. The ship was designed to open a gateway through space-time, a shortcut between stars, but instead of reaching another system, what they've really uncovered isn't another dimension, but a reflection of their own guilt and fear, a hell shaped by the human mind. In the end, these films show us that every attempt to control reality only proves how little of it we truly understand. But every now and then a film comes along which reminds us that even if we're not in control of the story, we can still choose how to play our part. The most understated Will Ferrell performance you're ever likely to see,
I brought you flowers,
combined with a stellar supporting cast, resulted in a hidden gem of a movie that deserved so much more recognition than it received. In Stranger Than Fiction, Ferrell plays Harold Crick, an ordinary man who suddenly begins to hear a narrator describing his life and even predicting his death.
Hello, someone there?
What follows is part comedy, part romance, and part existential puzzle, as Harold struggles to work out whether his reality is truly his own. It's heartfelt, funny, and thought-provoking. So here's the question. If someone else was writing your story, would you fight it or learn to live it well? Let me know in the comments.
In this video, we've pulled apart the idea of reality to the extent where my grip on it feels weaker now than it did before I started making the video. So where does that leave us? Well, I think it takes us to the question that I should have been asking all along. Not what's real, but how do we find meaning in a world where we don't know what's real?
If there's one film that captures the sheer confusion of trying to find meaning in modern life, it's 2022's Everything Everywhere All at Once. Evelyn starts out overwhelmed by possibility, crushed by tax forms and bad relationships. She's also haunted by unrealised dreams of being a performer, but then she's literally split across every version of herself that could have ever been, each one more absurd than the last, even becoming a rock at one point. What she discovers isn't a grand answer to existence, but a small one. Meaning isn't something hidden out there in another universe, it's created right here through care and love. The film's message echoes a very old idea from existential philosophy, that the world might not have inherent purpose, but we can give it purpose through our actions. Sartre called it existence before essence. We aren't born with meaning. We make it. Because if everything really is happening everywhere all at once, then meaning isn't something we search for, it's something we choose, right now in this one version of the world. You may have noticed that there's been a proliferation of multiverse films, especially in the past 10 years or so. Some really good, and some just kind of cashing in on the idea. But where does the idea of a multiverse come from? And why is it so popular now? The multiverse has roots in both science and philosophy. In quantum physics, there's the many worlds interpretation, the idea that every possible outcome of every event actually happens in some alternate branch of reality. It's a fascinating idea, but what these films are really tapping into isn't physics, it's psychology. The multiverse gives us a new language for regret, for all the paths we didn't take. Films like Sliding Doors or The Flash aren't about parallel dimensions, they're about the versions of ourselves we imagine we could have been. The multiverse has become a metaphor for choice and consequence. And maybe it's no coincidence that this boom in multiverse storytelling arrived at the same time as social media, when we're constantly confronted with alternate lives, better versions of other people, and the nagging question, did I end up in the wrong timeline? The best of these films, like Into the Spider-Verse or Everything Everywhere All at Once, don't leave us lost in infinite possibilities. They pull us back to the one truth that cuts through all of them. Meaning only exists in the life you're actually living.
Earlier in the video, we touched on a glitch in the matrix, the idea that we're all living in a computer simulation. And famously, Elon Musk said that the chances we're at base reality are 1 in billions. But economist Robin Hanson has a different perspective. He says the simulation hypothesis is possible, but not probable. And I'm inclined to agree with him.
For it to work, future civilizations would not only need the technology to run endless ancestor simulations, they'd also need the desire to do it. And history suggests curiosity about the past fades long before population or computing power can make that scale of simulation worthwhile. Hansen even jokes that it's understandable why someone like Elon Musk might think he's in a simulation. He's living the sort of extraordinary life a future gamer might want to replay. But for most of us, living fairly ordinary lives, the odds are tiny. Why would anyone bother to simulate a fairly mundane life like mine or yours when they could recreate Napoleon, Cleopatra, or a Mars colonist? So while it's fun to think about, the likelier truth is simpler. This probably is base reality, and it's ours to make sense of. Which brings us right back to meaning. Whether or not the universe is simulated, the choices we make inside it are still real to us.
The movies can't tell us exactly what reality is, but they can help us to live with the uncertainty. From Neo's awakening to Truman's escape, from Evelyn's chaos to Sam Lowry's dream. Every one of them experienced the same dilemma we do. How to keep going when the world no longer makes any sense. And maybe that's why we keep watching, because Even if reality is simulated or subjective or entirely invented, our experience of it, the laughter, the fear, the love, are as real as anything ever can be. The truth is, if reality is an illusion, we don't need to escape it. We just need to live well inside it. I'm Tom D. Mann, and you've been watching The Movies Present, a guide to reality.